Hi, it's Tim. Welcome to National Parks and the History of Science.
And I'm Marissa. In this episode, we'll learn about using tree rings to understand the past. That field of science is called Dendrochronology. Dendro meaning tree, and chronology meaning a sequence through time. Dendrochronology tells us about prehistoric human life, ancient climates, even when and where earthquakes and tsunamis happened in the past.
This branch of science began in several national parks and monuments in the Southwest. Parks like Mesa Verde, Aztec ruins, Chaco culture, Canyon de Chelly, Navajo, Wupatki, and more.
They all feature ancient settlements and the homelands of many indigenous communities. To begin learning about them, we talked by phone with a former ranger from Mesa Verde National Park.
Gawatsi, Gaybella Hopa. My name is Thelma Jean Axie, TJ for short. There are 21 Pueblos who claim direct descendancy from the Mesa Verde region. Laguna Pueblo, where I am from, the Hopi, the Zuni, Acoma, and then all the Rio Grande Pueblos. These were homes. These were homes to the ancient Pueblo people, and they are still seen as homes by present Pueblo people today.
So we're standing this morning in a cliff dwelling called Balcony House. And Balcony House is one of many hundreds of cliff dwellings that are here in Mesa Verde National Park. They're built with sandstone, and those blocks are held together with mud mortar. And then where people needed to build a floor ceiling, or in this case, a balcony, they used wooden beams and then smaller wood elements as well. The first Anglo people who were credited with spending time in Mesa Verde did not necessarily know who had built any of these places or when they had been built. One of the things that happened in those early days is that the wood itself was not considered to be an important element.
The wood is actually really informative. To learn why, we talked with Ron Towner. He's an archaeologist at the Laboratory of Tree Ring Research who uses tree rings to understand the people who lived in these places long ago. Ron, how is wood useful for understanding the past?
Trees are living archives of information. They stand in one place for a long time and collect environmental information, ecological information, information about humans. You can see that in good years, wet years, you get a fat ring, and in dry years, you get a narrow ring. And it's that pattern that's important. You said wide, wide, narrow, narrow, wide, 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 narrow. Something like that.
Here's how the science works. Let's say you drill a core out of a living tree. You count and measure rings back to exactly 250 years before today. Suppose that core has a distinctive run of narrow and wide rings, like a unique barcode. If you take a core from a dead tree and see that same pattern, you can overlap the cores and extend the chronology as far back as the dead tree allows. Then, if you find a fence post that matches some pattern in the chronology, you'll know when people made that fence post, what kind of climate they lived in, whether they experienced forest fires, and maybe even where they got the wood to make the post.
So dendrochronology got its start in Arizona in the early 20th century. What's the story?
Andrew Olcott Douglas, who invented the field, was an astronomer. His real interest is sunspots and their relationship to climate. So what he's looking for is a way to see what the climate of the past was. So he goes and collects lots and lots of samples and builds this sequence back into, I want to say, the 1500s, something like that.
In his tree rings, Douglas found regular cycles of sunspot activity. But more important to our story was his method of building chronologies by overlapping samples. It caught the attention of archaeologists who were studying ancient Puebloan sites. They wanted to know if he could build chronologies with all of those wooden beams. A collaboration started, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Aztec Ruins National Monument is part of the beginning story of how dendrochronology became an important tool. And so in 1919, Earl Morris recovered several intact beams from several rooms that he was excavating in Aztec West, and he worked with A.E. Douglas to take samples of those wood beams. At the same time, there were excavations happening at Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon. They were able to determine that the two locations and the two sites were contemporary.
This was huge at that point in time. People had no idea. They knew they were related because they had the same kind of pottery and similar kinds of architecture and stuff like that, but they didn't know the exact relationship. So he then goes out for the next 15 years to various places to collect samples from archaeological sites. So he goes to Mesa Verde and collects from Spruce Tree House and Balcony House. He goes to Navajo National Monument up by Kayenta, goes to the Hopi villages. They were occupied, and he gets permission from people there to sample in their houses.
By 1929, Douglas has a continuous chronology from living trees and wood from occupied Hopi villages back to about the year 1260. And he's got a second chronology from wood in ancient buildings. But the two chronologies are not connected, so they don't have actual dates for these buildings. But then came the discovery of the missing link.
He goes to a place up by Sholo, Arizona. This guy that they knew, Fred Whipple, had this ruin on his ranch. So they excavate a little bit, and lo and behold, he finds HH39, which is the piece that overlaps both chronologies, both the archaeological stuff and the living tree stuff, and creates a single sequence that goes from, at that point, 1929 back to, I think it was the 700s. He was immediately able to say, oh, Chaco is in the 1090s. Mesa Verde is in the late 1200s. Navajo National Monument is in the early 1300s. So that changed the whole dynamic of understanding the cultural evolution of these societies. It compressed it a lot.
The ability to determine absolute dates is what makes dendrochronology incredibly valuable. But there's more to tree rings than just dates. In some cases, they reveal the finer details of human life. For example, Ron and his colleagues have used tree rings from several mountain ranges to figure out where the wood used in buildings at Chaco came from. That's been a mystery because there are no trees nearby.
You know, Chacos didn't have horses, they didn't have wagons, they didn't have the wheel, and we estimate that probably 250,000 beings brought into Chaco, all on somebody's shoulders. One of my colleagues and I have looked at these chronologies, and you can see just slight differences. In the early dates of Chaco in the 900s, the trees were coming from the south. Kind of in the middle period, they were coming from the west, and at the very end, they were coming from the north.
Wood from a single building also reveals the life of a family or a small group. As a family grows, it might need more space.
So one of the things that that archaeologists were able to discover about the wood in the balcony is that the two different episodes that was built in, the earlier piece of it on the left-hand side, that whole element, those two rooms were built in the 1240s, and the right-hand part further back was built in the 1270s. And they're able to tell that because of those primary beams.
From these wooden beams, science has proven that there were times of drought, times of rain and moisture, creating growth. Again, providing additional information as to when the people prospered and when they struggled. Because of this information and part of our oral traditional storytelling, We know that because of the severe drought, the people had to think about what would be best for their families, for the communities, for everyone as a whole. Pueblo people have always known that this is where we came from, where we emerged, and where we began. It still blows me away to put my feet on a spot that my ancestors walked. It's amazing. It's incredible.
I think the parks provide a place where everyone can go to and everyone can find a connection. And you may find that connection just through, the nerdy science part of it, or you may find the connection through the peace that you may find in a quiet place at the park. You may find that by experiencing the culture of an ancient people. But ultimately it comes down to people connecting with the past, connecting with ancestors, connecting with other cultures, learning about the human experience.
What a wonderful note to end on. Trees connect ancient human experience to our own through science. I find that both fascinating and beautiful.
Yeah, me too. We hope you'll get a chance to experience these fascinating ancient places up close. For more connections, keep watching National Parks and the History of Science.